Hello, and welcome to the Riff Arcade spin-off show, Let's Playto. I'm your host, Butts, and on this show, I'll break down your favorite games to show you their social, historical, and philosophical themes. Now, I don't have a degree in any of those fields, but I hope you will be inspired to engage with these topics and games for yourself. This is a fan-made project, so any opinions that sneak through are mine and mine alone. So please, sit back, enjoy the episode, and be ready, because spoilers are incoming. Today, hesitation is defeat, with From Software's Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. This is an awful name because you in fact die many times, way more than 2. You play as Wolf, a shinobi bodyguard to Divine Heir Lord Kuro. That's the good news, you're a freaking sweet shinobi. The bad news is literally everything else. See, Kuro has the power to make people unkillable, which is very useful if, say, your country is on the verge of being conquered. Unfortunately, your country is on the verge of being conquered, and Kuro wants out. Management disagrees.
The Divine Heir. Last we stood together was your uncle's funeral.
Lord Genichiro. Thank you.
Leave this to me.
So the noble shinobi stands in our way.
More bad news. You lose an arm. But good news is back. Now you have a sweet gadget robot arm. It's up to you to save Kuro. The scale and story of Sekiro is smaller compared to other From Software games, but it's just as deep. There is a lot going on in this game. Unlike Dark Souls, which takes place in the fictional land of Lordran, or Bloodborne, which is set in Yharnam, Sekiro has some historical, real-world connections. Bad news is I'm not talking about it all in just one theme. But that's why I have good news. There are 2 themes today. Sekiro is a deep game. It's got many things to say. Things like why immortality sucks, orphans and parents. Also, the theme of being a shinobi is freaking cool. Big theme there. But we're going to focus on 2 overarching themes that I think run through the whole game. This episode's going to be a little different and a little long, and we're only going to be able to dip our toes into these topics. But let's see how the writings of 2 infamous thinkers can explain the story of Sekiro. First, we need some background info. But first, I need to put up a disclaimer. We're about to discuss some freaking sweet Japanese history, and I'm not Japanese. I'm not even turning Japanese, at least I don't think so. So if you want to learn properly about this subject, check out Japanese sources at your local library. Sekiro takes place at the end of the Sengoku period. Just for fun, this is around the same time that Shakespeare is presenting Romeo and Juliet.
In the closing years of the Sengoku era, Japan was consumed by perpetual conflict. The fires of war raged on, spreading deep into the mountains, to the land of Ashina.
From the late 1400s to exactly 1600, Japan is one big civil war. This was a time in Japan similar to the feudal period in the Middle Ages, or Italy prior to the Renaissance. Lots of small local princedoms vying for power. Alliances are made and broken, no central unifying government, sweet tapestry paintings. Also, like medieval Europe, there was a social caste system with their own knights, the samurai. The chaos was broken when the three great unifiers, unified, man, they've really nailed that nickname, Japan. Oda Nobunaga, Hideyoshi Toyotomi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Remember this Tokugawa guy, he'll come up later. The Sengoku era is full of myths and legends. In another fun parallel, it's Japan's version of the Wild West. Larger-than-life figures strolling across popular imagination and inspiring fiction for generations. The Sengoku era came to an end when Tokugawa Ieyasu was victorious at the Battle of Sekigahara. This cemented Tokugawa's power and led to the Tokugawa shogunate, which ruled Japan from the central government in Tokyo until 1868, around the time the 14th Amendment is passed. This is all paralleled in the game. 20 years before the game begins, Isshin Ashina stages a coup that establishes Ashina as a regional power. But now, Ashina is on the brink of collapse. You play as Wolf, and you have been assigned as the personal bodyguard to Lord Kuro.
As of today, he is your master. Defend him with your life. If he is taken, bring him back at any cost.
Kuro isn't the leader of the Ashina clan, but he is a symbol for his people, and he has a connection to the Divine Dragon, the local deity. The Interior Ministry is trying to unify Japan, and are readying for another attack to subjugate Ashina. Warriors like Gyobumasa.
My name is Gyobumasa Oniwa!
Are holding the ministry back, but just barely. Ashina is getting desperate, which is why the leader of the Ashina clan, Lord Genichiro, is trying to force Lord Kuro to use his connection with the Divine Dragon to create an army of unkillable warriors.
I do not wish to corrupt the lives of men.
Look at this mountain of bodies. Ashina cannot be defended by normal means. Not me.
In Sekiro's world, immortals are people who could be killed and rise again. But our first thinker has something to say about that. Karl Marx was born in Trier, Germany in 1818. His father was an upper-middle-class lawyer, and his mother was from a wealthy Dutch Jewish family. Like, wealthy family. His aunt was the grandmother of the guy who founded the Philips Company. Marx was the third of 10 children, but this being industrial-era Europe, his two older brothers died when he was 1. He was privately tutored by his father till high school. He attended the University of Bonn, where he wanted to study philosophy, but his father wanted him to be a lawyer. Guess the tension kinda got to Karl because his grades fell, he joined a radical poets club, and was challenged to a freaking duel on campus. He transferred to University of Berlin by his dad. Also, I'm not saying Karl Marx killed a man. Marx declined the duel and someone else fought in his place, but there's not much post-duel info on the challenger, and there's plenty of post-duel info on Karl. He married his childhood sweetheart, Jenny von Westphalen, and got his education back on track. He got his doctorate at the University of Jena and moved to Paris and then Cologne, where he began his work as a journalist for radical socialist newspapers. It was here that Marx began to take an interest in economic philosophy and began to solidify his thinking. He met his longtime friend and collaborator Friedrich Engels in a chess cafe in Paris. He moved to Brussels in 1845 and published the Communist Manifesto. You may have heard of it. He then moved to London and devoted himself fully to his work and his writing. It was still industrial-era Europe, so this plunged his family into extreme poverty. He wrote articles for various papers, including the New York Daily Tribune, where he supported the abolitionism movement and the Union cause during the American Civil War. In 1867, he wrote the first part of a planned trilogy, Das Kapital. He never got to finish because he died of bronchitis in 1889. His unfinished notes were worked into further editions. Marx is one of the most influential writers of all time. And yes, there is the big red elephant in the room. But we're going to try to focus on actual writings. You might be surprised with how much you agree with what he has to say. Do you like public transportation, mom and pop stores, and regulated banks? Well, so did Uncle Karl. I'm obviously not going to get anywhere near summarizing Marx's thoughts. I mean, books have been written about books that have been written about books that have been written about Marx. So we're going to zero in on what's relevant to Sekiro. Marx wasn't a fan of capitalism. It's kind of his thing. That and the beard. God, that's a great beard. And one of his critiques is how value is created. Let's say there's a factory. A worker produces a shoe. The material for the shoe costs $5 and the worker is paid $3. The shoe is sold for $10. He can increase the value of his commodity by adding fresh labor, and therefore more value to the value in hand by making, for instance, leather into boots. The same material now has more value because it contains a greater quantity of labor. The boots have therefore more value than the leather, but the value of the leather remains what it was. It has not expanded itself, has not, during the making of the boots, annexed surplus value. If we add up 3 and 5, we get, oh my god, why did Karl Marx make me bring math into this? We get 8, but the shoe sold for 10. $2 extra have been created. Well, sweet, free money. But those extra $2 go to the factory owner, not the shoemaker. Marx says this exploitation of workers is how capitalism creates value. Workers create value, not factory owners. You only get profits by taking value from somewhere else. And it scales up from there. That factory worker gets paid daily and works a set amount of time. But at some point in the day, he will create enough shoes to offset the wages paid to him. It only takes the worker 5 pairs of shoes to earn back his daily paycheck, but he makes 8 pairs in a day. Those 3 extra pairs are all profit for the factory, on top of the extra $2 per pair. But that sucks, right? The worker could just stop after evening out his wages, or sell the shoes himself and keep the $2 extra. This is one of Marx's main critiques of capitalism: worker exploitation. The real value of a commodity is, however, not in its individual value, but its social value. That is to say, the real value is not measured by the labor value that the article in each individual case costs the producer, but by the labor time socially required for its production. It's the old buy low, sell high idea, just with time and effort. You pay someone to do a job, they create value over and above what they are paid, you pocket that value for yourself. The value of a commodity is, in itself, of no interest to the capitalist. What alone interests him is the surplus value that dwells in it, and is realizable by sale. Realization of the surplus value necessarily carries with it the refunding of the value that was advanced. This theme of exploitation is all over Sekiro. First off, Wolf can come back to life, but not for free. That life has to come from somewhere.
It's said to be a power of the divine heir's dragon heritage. Those who have been given the power of resurrection. They are revived upon death, repeatedly. That the dragon's heritage can bestow the power of resurrection. However, it is not any ordinary power. Repeated use leads to stagnation, which will eventually reach a point where it overflows. This causes those who do not have the power to become sick, a disease known as dragon rot.
Remember how value can only be created by taking it from somewhere else? All your resurrection comes from the life of the people you meet in the world. Die enough times, and you start taking other people's life to fuel your own. The leader of the Ashina clan, Lord Genichiro, is so desperate to halt the destruction of Ashina that he is trying to exploit Kuro to use his resurrection power on others.
We managed to drive them back once, but the Interior Ministry's army is far too powerful.
And that is why you wish to use the power of my blood. It doesn't matter how much power you obtain. You'll keep on fighting until you're a monster, incapable of feeling pain or fear. I do not wish to corrupt the lives of men.
Look at this mountain of bodies. Ashina cannot be defended by normal means. Not me.
And when that fails, he tries to create false immortals, beings that cannot die, but eventually lose their humanity.
Defeating Genichiro.
I see. To think that Lord Genichiro would go as far as to drink the rejuvenating sediment.
Rejuvenating sediment?
That's what we call a particularly concentrated part of the rejuvenating waters. I'm sure you saw it for yourself. The rejuvenating sediment grants great resilience in one's flesh. One becomes able to withstand blows that would be fatal to anyone else.
Of this man.
The rejuvenating waters. That is what it is called.
Are you telling me that this is Ashina's secret weapon?
I am. Those who drink it cannot fully die. No, they become unable to die at all. The rejuvenating water, it also...
It springs from the dragon's blood, does it not?
Yes.
Lady Emma, I do not believe the dragon's blood is sacred. Not at all.
These special waters flow from the divine dragon, the very being that is tied to Kuro and your own resurrection power. And they flow through a special village in Ashina. This village has been drinking that water for generations, and it was the center of a ritual worship of the divine dragon. Pilgrims would travel, make sacrifices, and be invited to join the divine dragon at its palace.
Tell me.
It's the year of the Dragon Spring pilgrimage.
But now, most of its residents are unkillable and inhuman.
Tell me about the priest.
He's the most important person in the entire village. You can find him in the shrine, all the way up the riverside, near the water's source. He told us, let us become citizens of the palace. If you drink enough sake, you shall become citizens, he said. Huh? A citizen of the palace? I don't really get it, but that's what he said.
And the village is being exploited by the local priest to turn himself into a palace noble, and eventually to live with the divine dragon.
Finally, we may be accepted. We may serve as their humble servants. At long last.
The priest, Lord Kuro, and you are all taking something from somewhere else. These are all passive exploitations, but there are plenty of aggressive exploitations. If you want a guide to that, look no further than the Italian Renaissance.
Cosa? Who are you? Niccolo di Bernardo de Machiavelli.
Niccolo Machiavelli was born in Florence, Italy in 1496, 20 years after the start of the Sengoku era. Neat. Florence had just established a republic after being ruled by the Medici family for 60 years. Machiavelli got a job as the secretary of Florence, creating official government documents and engaging in diplomatic missions. This allowed him to travel and meet people from Spain, France, Portugal, and Rome. It was during these travels that Machiavelli's political philosophies began to form. He observed what was happening and what was working. In 1509, Machiavelli led a local militia to repel an invasion from Pisa, the town that's bad at building towers. But 3 years later, the Medici pulled an Uno reverse and took back Florence. Machiavelli was stripped of power and banished for a year. The Medici pulled another Uno reverse and arrested Machiavelli, torturing him on made-up charges. He moved out to his family's estate, but kept in contact with many of his political friends and allies. Mac, I'm just going to call him Mac from now on because he has a long name, was still loyal to his native city, and even after all this, wanted nothing more than to get back to work helping his hood. Might have been some Stockholm Syndrome involved too, I don't know. He tried for years to win favor with the Medici and gain back a government job, but he was only ever trusted with minor civic duties. He spent most of his time corresponding with allies and writing prose, essays, books, and even a few successful plays. Mac is often only thought of as a political philosopher, but he was a skilled historian and diplomat. He died in 1529, and 5 years later, his most influential work, The Prince, was published. He was immediately banned by the Catholic Church, probably because Mac wasn't too nice about his thoughts on some of the popes. The Prince is often cited as the first work of modern philosophy. See, up till this point, political philosophy was all about how to create a good society. When Socrates talks about how to create a good city, he starts by defining what is good. Aristotle asked what the purpose of government is, and then wrote how a government can fulfill it. All political thought was focused on a goal over and above politics, and politics was then focused on achieving that goal. But Machiavelli is different. The Prince doesn't care what a good or just city should be. He doesn't have any goal in mind except to grab and hold onto power. You don't need to actually be virtuous to hold power. Therefore, it is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. Just fake it. Having power is all that matters. Ever heard of something being called Machiavellian? It comes from this book. A prince ought to have no other aim or thought, nor select anything else for his study, than war and its rules and discipline. For this is the sole art that belongs to he who rules, and it is of such force that it not only upholds those who are born princes, but it often enables men to rise from a private station to that rank. It popularized the idea that the end justifies the means. It is better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. This is another reason the book was banned by the Catholic Church. It conflicted with their ideas of what politics and ethics are for. The Prince is a purely practical book. There's no theory whatsoever. And if you live in a politically violent time and place, it actually is still relevant. For instance, Machiavelli writes that, although one may be very strong in armed forces, yet in entering a province, one has always need of the goodwill of the natives.
We are Ashina! We are unbreakable!
Okay, bad example. Upon this, one has to remark that men ought either be well treated or crushed, because they can avenge themselves of lighter injuries. Of more serious ones, they cannot. Therefore, the injury that is to be done to a man ought to be of such a kind that one does not stand in fear of revenge. There we go. Machiavelli says if you want to take over an area, either use diplomacy or utterly crush them. No in between. And a quick glance around Ashina shows the interior ministry is going with the latter. At this point, they have to. And he who becomes master of a city accustomed to freedom and does not destroy it, may expect to be destroyed by it. For in rebellion it has always the watchword of liberty and its ancient privileges as the rallying point, which neither time nor benefits will ever cause it to forget. Just like with exploitation, the theme of conquest is all over Sekiro. Ashina only exists because their founder, Ishin, started a conquest first.
Could you tell me about the rebellion?
Oh, the rebellion. We just took back what was stolen from us.
That's...
Before this land was... It's a place where we, the Ashina people, lived, where the waters flowed straight from the source. We were a people who loved our country dearly. Amidst the chaos that was Japan, the endless casualties, the flames of war, we found the perfect opportunity to take back our land. But now, it's a place of death.
Deep in Ashina's past, there was another invasion. An ancient scroll tells about the Okami, personal guards of the Divine Dragon, attempting to invade Ashina. They used illusions and lightning attacks, but were driven back by a poisonous blade and the Ganon Link fight. To this day, lightning attacks are forbidden.
Heresy, you say? If it is for the sake of preserving Ashina, I will seize any manner of heretical strength. I will endure any burden. Behold the lightning of Tomoe.
This goes all the way to the top, to the Divine Dragon itself. The dragon is not native to Japan.
The dragon's heritage was set free from its homeland, and it drifted here to Japan. Its power was never meant for this land. Until something is done, it will continue to corrupt the lives of those who encounter it.
It found the land of Ashina, specifically a certain special village, and displaced the other gods already there. This all takes place before the game. The Interior Ministry's invasion takes place during. You start the game as Ashina is grasping at straws to keep the Interior Ministry at bay. I keep calling them the Interior Ministry, but the Japanese word for it could mean either a group or a single person. An Interior Minister. A title that Tokugawa Ieyasu actually held. I told you to remember Tokugawa, he's back. Ministry samurai wear red armor inspired by historical armor of Tokugawa samurai. The setting is fictional, but you struggle against the inevitable conquest of an actual historical figure around the time it actually happened. Sekiro has two sides of its story. The first is a spiritual conflict involving immortality and the Divine Dragon. The second is the physical threat of Tokugawa's invasion. There is so much in Sekiro that I didn't get to cover. We didn't talk about how immortality is a curse, or how stagnation breeds rot and disease physically and spiritually. Getting your left arm chopped off, the influence of Buddhism directly into the game's plot, the class difference between the Okami and the Sunken Valley clan, the cycles of hatred. I originally wanted to talk about colonization and imperialism, but I just couldn't do that without reading a lot more Marx, and I just can't do that. It presents itself to us as a complex of two things. Quantity of use values and is an increase of material bourgeois economy consists of such quantities of the circulating medium is determined by the sun. But both sides of the conflict boil down to power. If you're an employer, do you wield it to extract profits from your workers? If you're a ruler, do you wield it to extend your own reign? How should people use power? Should people use other people's power? You play as Wolf, but the tragic character of the game is Genichiro. Genichiro has this Shakespearean flaw. He loved his country so much and was willing to do anything to save it that those very actions destroyed Ashina.
Ashina. This land is everything to me. For her sake, I will shed humanity itself.
It was his kidnapping of Kuro that led you to your crusade, and in your crusade, you slaughter Ashina's last line of defense. Even Genichiro himself falls to your blade. We all have power over something, if not other people, then ourselves. Sometimes that can feel like the only power you have. The philosophers have hitherto only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it.